guys, it's Violet here with True Crime and Art. I got about midway through recording, as evident by my painting here, and then realized that it had stopped recording. So, to add to matters, I don't have an extra canvas, so I'm just going to talk about all the things that I just talked about, and we're going to pretend like that you saw this be painted because it was really cool, because I know you guys like to see the blending, and I'm really sorry, but this is where we're at. And I think I did such a good intro on the last one. I don't know. Anyway, hi guys, welcome back. This week we are talking about Derrick Todd Lee, the Baton Rouge serial killer. Now, I am going to be doing a couple of episodes about Baton Rouge serial killers because, right when Derrick Todd Lee was active, there was also another serial killer active in the same exact area. And so I'm going to do a story about both of them. Okay, guys? So make sure to come back for that. Since you guys missed the last intro, I'm going to tell you the painting today, which is just kind of funny that you missed all of that. I'm just kind of doing it from my head. The idea is to do a Halloween themed painting, so we'll see how it goes. If I can get it to record completely this time, right? Anywho, so Derrick Todd Lee was born on November 5th, 1968 in St. Francisville, Louisiana. If you are local to Louisiana, you will know that St. Francisville is beautiful. It has a really popular plantation there called the Myrtles, which is considered to be haunted. It was on Ghost Hunters, and maybe I'll do an episode on that one day because I love the Myrtles. Anyway, St. Francisville is beautiful. Well, this is where Derrick Todd Lee was born. Very soon after he was born, his father abandoned the family. And after doing some research about his father, found out that he suffered from bipolar disorder, and he had a string of battery and assault charges, as well as accidental homicide? Is that negligent homicide? Yes, because we're going to be talking about that for a bit. Now, Derrick was one of 4 children, and he lived with his mother and his stepfather, whom she remarried very soon after Derrick's biological father left. Derrick's stepfather, unfortunately, was physically abusive to Derrick. He did not like Derrick. He would beat him regularly. Derrick was also tormented at school. He was considered mentally incapacitated. They used the R word. I am not going to use the R word because I don't like it. But he had an IQ of 65, which anything 65 to 75 range is considered special ed, essentially. And Derrick attended special ed classes growing up, and he was made fun of, and he was bullied incessantly. Really, the only thing that he liked in school was band, which he found that he excelled at. But it still didn't help the fact that school was tough for him. People were mean to him, like kids are, because kids can be assholes, right? Now, Derrick, all mental capacity aside, very early on proved to be pretty creepy. Okay, so whenever he was 11, he was caught peeping into neighbors' windows, and this is something he apparently did regularly. So he was the neighborhood peeping Tom, which is super effing creepy. When he was 13, he was arrested for the first time for burglarizing and vandalizing a local candy store. On that same day, he also assaulted a woman in front of his mother. His mother didn't do shit about him assaulting a woman. He's arrested and eventually released. He actually didn't spend a lot of time in juvie for that, and he's released back to the care of his parents. 3 years later, when he's 16, he's arrested for negligent homicide of a classmate named Valente Brooks. Now, this was because they had a gun, and the gun went off, and she died. Now, just to add creepiness to this story, some 20 years later, Derrick Todd Lee's son, Derrick Lee, I know, it's confusing, he was arrested for negligent homicide when he and a classmate were handling a gun and the gun went off. That's freaking crazy. Anyway, sorry, I had to segue to that. So that recently happened. Go back to Derrick Todd, who again is 16. He's been arrested but not convicted of negligent homicide. He's released and he goes about his merry way, which basically means more peeping Tom nonsense. When he's 19, he burns his car. He sets his car on fire in order to collect the insurance money. Of course, it does not work because, as we have established, he is not very smart, so he's caught. He doesn't stay in jail for very long, but later that year, he attempts to rob someone and he assaults them because it didn't go well, and he's arrested. Again, doesn't stay in jail long, is released. Which at this point, my head's starting to throb, being like, I don't know why he keeps being released. Are our jails that full that you have to release this monster all the time? So later that year, whenever he is 20 years old, he meets and marries a woman named Jacqueline Sims. Jacqueline would end up being the mother of his 3 children. And from the get-go, it was not a healthy relationship. Raise your hand if you're surprised about that. Because he was abusive and physically, mentally abusive. He attacked her regularly and he was just an asshole. Now, there was one day where Jacqueline's father came over to their house and Derrick he was not about that life. So he took a shotgun and threatened to kill Jacqueline's father right then and there. The police came. Jacqueline and her father were like, no, we don't want to press charges. It was a misunderstanding. So he doesn't go to jail. Derrick Todd laid low for a little bit until about 1993, when January 1st, 1993, actually, he and an accomplice go to rob an elderly gentleman. And instead of just robbing him, they also attack him with a 6-foot-long stick. Thankfully, the gentleman survives, but he's unable to identify his attackers. Now, 3 months later, Derrick approaches a teenage couple that are parked in a cemetery, and he approaches them with a machete. Now, a machete is like a 6-inch long knife that's used in cutting down crops. Okay, so I'll put a picture if you've never seen a machete. He apparently attacks this teenage couple, and right in the middle of an attack, a sheriff's officer drives up because he's patrolling the area and drives up, and Derrick takes off into the woods. And of course, they never freaking catch him. So how, guys, how is this unintelligent man getting away with all of this? I don't know. And from pictures of him, he doesn't seem all that fit to where he could like sprint away. I don't know. The more I researched into this, the more annoying it got. Okay, I'm actually going to paint now with you guys around me or watching me. Whew. What day is it? Oh, it's Thursday here. I don't know what day it is when you're watching this, but it's Thursday here, which means tomorrow's Friday, which makes me a happy camper. So let's move on. On September 24th, he assaulted someone at a Salvation Army clothes drop-off, which, what a douchebag. Someone is just there. They just cleaned out their closets, trying to be nice, doing a good deed, dropping off the clothes, and this asshole comes and attacks them. And guess what, guys? He was not caught. Surprise, surprise, not caught. Now, some theorize the reason why police weren't putting this together is because he being Derrick, would jump around from parish to parish committing these crimes. So it was all these different jurisdictions, so it was harder to communicate. If you're not from Louisiana, yes, I know I just said parishes. We don't have counties. We have parishes. In 1998, single mom, Randy Mabrewer, I'm going to say that wrong, I'm so sorry. She and her 3-year-old son decided it was movie night, and they went to Blockbuster, which, yes, for you youngins out there, there was a place you had to go and rent movies. You couldn't just press a button. So her and her 3-year-old son went to Blockbuster, went to go rent a movie. People saw them there and said they left the store with their movies, right? The next morning, neighbors see Randy's 3-year-old son walking around by himself outside. And so they approach him and try to say, like, what's wrong? Do you need help? And he tells them that his mom is missing, that he cannot find her. Neighbors go to the house. They notice spots of blood, so they call the police. The police come, and they can see where there's a definite struggle, and they can see that Randy was probably attacked in her home, killed in her home, and removed from her home, all assumably while the son was sleeping. Now I'm going to go ahead and let you in on a little secret. It was Derrick Todd. He had broken into the home. He had sexually assaulted Randy while her son was sleeping. He murdered her, and then he disposed of her body. Now, later on, when Lee would confess to all of these murders, he never told police where her body was. So her body was never recovered. With Randy being his first known victim, after that, Lee went on to murder an additional 6 women that we are sure of. DNA was not what it is today. So they had the DNA, police had recovered DNA, but it wasn't able to be tested like it is today. And also they didn't have all of the databases that they have today. So, like there's the things where they send it to Ancestry or 23andMe. They didn't have access to that back then. Now, during this whole time of him murdering 6 additional women, Lee is consistently being arrested for burglary, breaking and entering, and being a peeping Tom, because he couldn't stop doing that. But every time he is let go, even though he has this extensive rap sheet, he is still let go. At this point, bodies are starting to rack up because, like I said, there was another serial killer that was active at the same time, which, oddly enough, they named him the other Baton Rouge serial killer. I bet that pissed him off, because serial killers are kind of like egomaniacs, so it probably did piss him off. Anyway, we'll talk about him later, because he is a doozy. So at this point, the Baton Rouge police, they get the FBI involved because they need some help. So the FBI comes in and does a profile and says they're looking for a white man, a loner, probably lives with his parents, 25 to 35. Well, boys and girls, that profile was very wrong. Lee was, I guess the age was right, but Lee was a black man that lived with his wife and kids. So they were way off on that. At this point, though, the whole city has lost their mind. Now, I lived in New Orleans at the time, but my family lived in Baton Rouge. So it was really scary because these were crimes that were happening in broad daylight. A lot of these women were taken directly from their homes in really nice neighborhoods. One of them was in like a really swanky part of town. And there was all of these, what I would consider to be urban legends going around about how he was getting people to open their doors and no sign of a struggle, like apparently I'm having with my words. So there was one urban legend that he recorded a baby crying and he would play it outside the door and women would come and look for a baby crying. There was talk that he dressed up as a pizza delivery man. Y'all, I don't know. But he never really actually talked about how he did get the women. It was said that he was actually pretty charming and he came across as very disarming. So these women, like I said, lived in really nice parts of town. There was one woman that was taken from a deli shop. And so they're just not quite sure how this was happening. So women in Baton Rouge, they started buying guns, which this is the South. A lot of people already have guns, but now everyone had guns. A couple of these crimes happened on or near LSU's campus. And so they enacted a buddy system to where, you didn't have to walk to your car alone. They didn't want women alone at any times. at LSU, they have these lakes that are beautiful. And it's really popular for women to go walking around the lakes or jogging around the lakes. And there was lots of press releases saying, like, don't do that. Because one of the women was taken from Stanford Avenue, which is right on the LSU lakes. So needless to say, everyone was freaking out. Now let's talk about the women that they found. They found a couple of bodies, and all of the bodies had shown signs of sexual assault and asphyxiation. So he was assaulting them and then strangling them. And all of them were missing like little personal items. So like their phones, their keys, just little personal items. So they weren't really being robbed. Essentially, he was taking trophies. In March of 2003, Derrick Todd Lee murdered his last victim, or last known victim, Carrie Lynn Yoder. Now, at this point, DNA had really come a long way, and they found a substantial amount of DNA at this crime scene. Carrie had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled, his usual MO. So they run this DNA through the database. Now, as you remember, Derrick Todd Lee has an extensive arrest record, and at this point, his DNA is in the system. Woohoo! The police are able to connect the murders because they had gotten DNA from all of these sites. They just couldn't process it at the time. Well, once the ball started rolling, they started figuring out, like, this DNA goes here, this DNA goes here. It just snowballed, and an arrest warrant was put out for Derrick Todd Lee. Now, Derrick, they're saying that he's mentally incapable, but he knew he was about to be arrested. So he took his family, packed up his family, sold their home, and they went to Chicago, and then they later went to Atlanta. Now, obviously he didn't cover his tracks too well because police were able to find him in a parking lot in Atlanta, and he didn't resist arrest and was like, okay, sure, let's go. Now, initially, he was only charged with the murder of Carrie Lynn Yoder, but by the time that Lee made it back to Baton Rouge, the DNA had been processed, and more murders have been connected to him, like definitively connected to him. At this point, Lee was also charged with the rape and murder of Charlotte Murray Pace, Pam Kennemore, and Trenisa Collum. So they're starting to rack up, right? All of these charges. At this point, he's charged with a couple of the rapes and murders of various women. And then in August 2004, he's charged and convicted with the murder of Geraldine DeSoto, who was found raped and stabbed in her home in 2002. Now, for this one, he was charged, convicted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And at this point, police officers are really trying to, they want to charge him for each count separately, but they want to go with their strongest cases first. So the next case they charge him with is Charlotte Murray Pace. That's the next case on the docket. Now, for this one, they had the most evidence, and Derrick Todd Lee was charged with rape, murder of Charlotte Murray Pace, and he was convicted. And for this one, he got the death penalty. Now, the other victims' families and the prosecutors, they felt like there's no way he can get out of jail now, and he's going to die in prison. So that's why they didn't proceed with other of the charges, because at that point it is just like a moot point, and it keeps them from having to go through the trauma of a trial. Because even though, I had conflicting thoughts about this, because I'm like, if that would have been my loved one, we'd have to do a trial, because I would want justice. But guys, can you imagine having to sit through and listen to all the things that happened to your loved ones? So I get it. Now, Derrick Todd Lee, he was sentenced, like I said, to death row in Angola State Prison, which, if you listen to my Ronald Dominique video. I told you about Angola. It is nothing to play with, especially if you're take part of that rodeo. This tree, he looks kind of spooky, right? Sorry, it threw me off this morning. Oh, anyway. So, where is Derrick Todd? Lee, you ask? He is dead. Dead as a doorknob. He actually died in prison of heart disease, which, you know, I really wanted him to have the death penalty, but bye. We don't need you. So, what do you guys think about this case? Do you think that law enforcement messed up? Do you think is it normal to be released that many times? Oh, that is a weird looking tree, isn't it? Sorry, I just had fun with the fan brush. I'm gonna add some more highlights right here. Yeah, there we go. So, what do you guys think? Tell me about it. Do you think that law enforcement messed up? Because at this point, there weren't very many African American serial killers, so it was kind of weird. And so, understandably, that's not what they were looking for. I don't know. So, what do you guys think? I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like and comment on your way out, and subscribe. Let some friends know, and if you hated it, you can let me know that too, because I got my first troll, which I feel like is woohoo! I've made it. I got my first troll. So I know this painting is a little different than what I usually do. I wanted something more abstract and just the colors. There we go. I like it. I'm gonna have to think about it. I don't know. I'll think about it. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. Bye.